Gather round, gang. Kept you waiting, huh? In ancient Sumerian tombs, recovered from the distant year of 2004, Anno Domini, archaeologists have discovered something utterly fascinating. A tablet containing what can only be described as a primitive form of digital entertainment has left researchers entirely perplexed and bewildered with astonishment. Within this ancient tableau, there is a disc, and contained on this disc is tiny, microscopic, cuneiform writing, only translatable by a time-forgotten machine known as a PlayStation 2. The writing on the disc describes a world of walking metal behemoths, nuclear weapons, and a lot of scantily clad women. The title of this tome, directly translated, is Metal Gear Solid 3: Snake Eater, a completely nonsensical name that can only have been devised by a truly sickened mind. The story and characters within have since become cultural icons. Join me today as we delve into this strange and hysterical work of fiction. Metal Gear Solid 3 is a tactical espionage action game written and directed by known madman and man-ass enjoyer Hideo Kojima, and published by Satan. 2004 was a big year for video games, marking the release of Half-Life 2, San Andreas, Halo 2, and Leisure Suit Larry. But in my opinion, all of these games pale in comparison to a game about a guy called Snake who eats snakes on a mission called Snake Eater. Kojima really outdid himself here.
That's major ocelot to you. And don't you forget it.
Oh boy, here we go. I'm gonna speedrun this so we're not stuck here for an hour. Spoilers, by the way. In 1964, CIA operative John, codenamed Naked Snake, is sent on a mission into the jungles of Russia to recover and rescue Nikolai Sokolov, a Russian nuclear weapons specialist wishing to defect from the Soviet Union. Snake is aided by Major Zero, his commander, and the boss, his mentor/mom/lover? Upon reaching Sokolov, Snake meets Ocelot, commander of the Ocelot Special Forces Unit. Snake beats his ass, and Ocelot instantly develops a crush that will continue throughout the rest of the series. Sokolov explains that he's being used by the USSR to develop Shagohod, a highly mobile tank with nuclear launch capability. After rescuing Sokolov, Snake is confronted by the boss, who has defected to the Soviet Union side and is now working for Colonel Volgin, a bisexual communist who hates women, aka your average tanky.
Burger King.
He also has lightning powers for some reason. I swear to God they never explain this. Nanomachines haven't been invented at this point, so they can't use that excuse like they do in every other game. He can just do that, I guess. Snake is attacked by the boss, who throws him into a river and captures Sokolov. As the boss and Volgin make their escape, Volgin also steals the Shagohod and launches a nuke at its research facility, framing the US government for the act. 2 weeks later, Snake is once again sent into the Russian wilderness to destroy the Shagohod, kill Volgin and the boss, and rescue Sokolov. Never mind. On the way, Snake meets up with his undercover contact, Eva, who carries a Chinese pistol, can't seem to remember the code phrase, and is definitely not a Chinese spy. They made sure to keep Snake a relatable protagonist in this moment by having him get absolutely stun-locked by the mere sight of cleavage. He's literally me. The two encounter Ocelot, Eva does the hypest shit imaginable, and Snake beats his ass yet again. Their duel is interrupted by a man who shoots bees out of his hands. No, I'm not joking. Bee-Man is known as the Pain, a member of the boss's special combat unit called the Cobras. Snake wins and continues onward. Later, he also fights the Fear, the End, the Fury, and the Sorrow, but we'll get there eventually. Snake makes his way to Groznygrad, the base in which the Shagohod and Volgin are currently located, while also occasionally encountering Eva, who awkwardly flirts with him each and every time. Since the concept of sex is entirely foreign to Snake, these advances go mostly unreciprocated. After sneaking into Groznygrad, Snake enters the facility disguised as one of Volgin's commanders, Ivan Rykov, and locates Sokolov. Unfortunately for Snake, Volgin enters and immediately grabs Snake's dick. Realizing that Snake's dick is not Rykov's dick, which Volgin is intimately familiar with, Volgin sees through the disguise, kills Sokolov, and beats the ever-living shit out of Snake. Captured and defenseless, Snake is tortured by Volgin and the boss, and he has his eye accidentally shot out by Ocelot. Volgin also reveals that he is in possession of $100 billion worth of Illuminati money, which is how he's been funding this whole operation. Yeah, the Illuminati is a thing, I forgot to mention that bit. Snake eventually escapes and regroups with Eva, who again desperately tries to teach Snake what sex is, failing miserably. Snake gets a nifty eye patch and once again sets out for Groznygrad. Finally making his way into the Shagohod's hangar, Snake faces down Volgin while Ocelot quietly has dirty thoughts about Snake in the corner. Snake kicks Volgin's ass and blows up the hangar, but the Shagohod survives. Now piloted by Volgin, Snake and Eva work together to bring them down. The two eventually destroy the Shagohod, Volgin is finally killed by a bolt of lightning, until the 5th game anyway, and Snake and Eva make their escape. On their way out, Eva girl bosses her way into a tree, and the worst section of the game begins. After a tedious escort mission, the two meet at spotted an awaiting airplane to make their escape, but Snake has some unfinished business to deal with first. In a field of lilies, Snake meets up with the boss, who shows him the gnarliest C-section scar of all time, and the two do battle. Snake wins the fight, and just before her death, the boss explains her vision. A world without borders, where soldiers aren't used as unwilling pawns by their respective government. Tearfully, Snake kills the boss and escapes with Eva. Snake has one final showdown with Ocelot, who reveals himself to actually have just been looking for an excuse to hang out with his crush the whole time. Jumps off the plane, and Snake and Eva escape to Alaska. Snake finally figures out what sex is. Eva reveals herself to be a Chinese spy, who could have seen that one coming. In her parting message to Snake, Eva reveals that the boss was never a traitor to the United States. After Volgin launched the nuke on Russia, she was given orders to die by Snake's hands to prove America's innocence. An order that she followed loyally to the end. Snake receives a medal for his actions, shakes hands with the president, and receives his title of Big Boss. Realizing that the government actually kind of sucks, Snake gives one final salute to the boss's grave, which reads, "In memory of a patriot who saved the world," and resolves to carry out her vision of a world without borders, something that he definitely interpreted correctly as a message of peace, and doesn't later become the main villain of the franchise from this interpretation.
That's damn good. I've never felt a tension like this before. That's so different from simply changing a clip.
Metal Gear Solid 3 is a game equipped with just about everything. Do you want a traditional stealth game, or do you want a Rambo simulator? Both options are valid. For my playthrough, I mostly chose to take the stealthy approach, tranquilizing who I could and killing only when they annoyed me, except for the Rambo bit. But I swear that was just for the video. I love mowing down crowds of people as much as the next guy, and hearing Snake scream at the top of his lungs is extremely funny, but I do find Kojima wanted me to play at least a little bit merciful, so I mostly stuck to that. This game really makes you feel like a covert operative alone in the Russian wilderness, armed with about every single weapon devised by human hands. They even got chloroform in this bitch. This isn't anything atypical of the Metal Gear games, but what is a new addition is the survival system. The Russian jungle isn't just dangerous because it has Russians in it, but also because it's the fucking jungle. I'm not entirely sure why anybody would willingly choose to enter any kind of jungle. I'm convinced that those Amazonian tribesmen are just built different from us, built better. The jungle is a foreign and hostile land, second only to the ocean. It's a place filled to the brim with crocodiles, snakes, and crabs. And that's not to mention the climate. I get angry when the humidity index hits anything higher than like 10%. Considering all of these hazards, it's not difficult to understand why Kojima decided to add a survival system to the game. Unlike previous Metal Gear games, eating food doesn't replenish your health. It replenishes your stamina, which in turn replenishes your health over time. Because of this, it's important to keep yourself fed at all times. Unfortunately, this jungle hasn't been bulldozed yet to make room for something nice and civilized like a McDonald's, preferably next to a strip mall and a Walmart, so we must subsist off the land, and just like the Native Americans, we use every part of the animal. Since we're in an uncivilized land, we must also provide for ourselves with disgustingly free healthcare. When Snake is wounded in battle, there is a chance that he might accrue injuries, which can only be fixed via the cure menu. Personally, I've been letting enemies shoot me with smaller caliber ammunition so that I might build up an immunity to larger ones, so that I don't have to keep squeezing bullets out of my skin like a Dr. Pimple Popper video. Another new addition to the series is the camouflage system. Snake comes with a number of camouflages, and each uniform is designed to blend in with a specific environment. The higher your camo index, the harder you are to see. A green camo will fit in the forested environments, while a black camo will help you blend into the dark, though I do recommend the zombie facemate over the black one because I'm not trying to get Snake put on Twitter. It's a good thing that Snake's fanny pack is capable of holding not only more weapons and ammo than a small country's entire arsenal, but also about 20 changes of clothes. Something that I love about the Metal Gear franchise is just how much it loves to break the rules of traditional game design. The first 2 hours of the game are, and I'm not exaggerating here, over 50% cutscene. And if you think the cutscenes taper off after that, you'd be dead wrong. I did the math. The game is, on average, 21.8% cutscene. And that's not taking into account the 10 hours worth of optional codec calls. What makes Metal Gear Solid 3 so great, despite the actual feature-length movie worth of cutscenes contained within, is the moments in between. Fighting for your life in a jungle, going against a guy covered in bees, the end fight in its entirety, it makes it all worth it. That's not to say that the cutscenes aren't great, they're iconic, but they're also, objectively, not video game. What I'm saying is, Kojima really needs to make a movie. Okay, before we go any further, I need to clarify a couple things. Throughout this section, I will be using Snake and Big Boss interchangeably. There's like 5 other guys in the Metal Gear world that go by Snake, and if they come up, I will clarify which one I'm referring to. But if I just say Snake, assume I'm talking about this Snake. Metal Gear's story is one of loyalty and betrayal. 2 patriotic soldiers are pit against one another, their loyalty exploited by those above them. In the end, the boss is buried in an unmarked grave, and is forever remembered as a traitor to her country. Throughout the game, Snake struggles with the idea that the boss has actually defected. He maintains that she wouldn't betray her country, and by extension, him. It's only when he finally accepts her betrayal in the end that he is willing to kill her, only to learn later that he was right. This leaves Snake feeling betrayed by his own country, planting the seed for his actions in the later games. Metal Gear Solid 3 gives us a glimpse into the lives of the characters that we will eventually come to battle: Big Boss, Ocelot, and Zero. In the previous games and the ones following, Big Boss is viewed as a heartless warmonger, and even after his quote-unquote death in the MSX games, his legacy is carried onward by Ocelot. I don't think it was ever said explicitly why Ocelot was so infatuated with Big Boss's legacy, but Metal Gear Solid 3 gives us the answer. Ocelot admired Snake, and saw him as something of a father figure. When the man fell into the pit of anger that led to his eventual acts of evil, Ocelot took the plunge with him. This is, I think, why so many people seem to love the story of Metal Gear Solid 3. It gives a huge amount of depth to a cast of characters that was previously just the bad guys. It transforms Big Boss from a warmongering psychopath into a confused, likely traumatized dog of war who simply knows no better way. Big Boss's intentions were good, but there's probably some sort of adage about good intentions and the kinds of roads they pave that would apply here. Many people question the nature of Snake's relationship to the boss. We know he loved her deeply, but in what way did he love her? Was it maternal? Or was it romantic? Or was it just a deep, undying respect for another soldier? I think there's elements of all three at play, but as Snake says,
It went deeper than that.
the boss was a part of Snake that he was forced to kill, the good part. We don't see much of Big Boss's transitional period between this game and his time as a villain. Peace Walker and 5 only give us a few glimpses into his psyche. I think it's noteworthy to see the difference in his personality in between this game and 5. And before you say anything, I know, this guy is technically not Big Boss, but he thinks he is, okay? Follow along here. In Metal Gear Solid 5, Snake is a nearly completely different person. In 3, he's expressive, personable, sometimes even downright friendly. The Big Boss we see in 5 is somber and quiet. Of the few lines he says almost with a sigh,
I'm already a demon. I won't scatter your sorrow to the heartless sea.
like he's exhausted from the many betrayals he's faced. He's a broken man lashing out against the world that broke him. The core tragedy of the series is that the boss made one single mistake. With her dying words, she imparted her final wish to the one man who could never carry it out: to create a world without borders, where soldiers aren't just pawns in the game of war. What she meant by this was a world of peace, where war doesn't have to happen and where soldiers aren't needed. But her failure was in not understanding that Snake couldn't perceive this world. Snake was a lifelong soldier. This was the only life that he could imagine. A world without soldiers makes no sense in his mind. Instead of a world without the need for soldiers, he interpreted it as a world where soldiers always have a place to belong. It isn't until Solid Snake comes along that the boss's vision is brought to life. This is why the franchise is so beloved by many. It simultaneously tells the story of a man's downfall to evil and another man's rise to good, but that's a story for another video. Metal Gear Solid is a franchise well known for its incredible boss fights, but 3 is the game that really sets the standard. Each and every member of the Cobra's unit is unique and memorable in their own way, and each of them tests the player's skills differently. The Pain is a tactical fight. You spend most of it underwater, dodging his attacks, popping up when the opportunity presents itself to take him down. Because of his B powers, which is a thing I never thought I'd seriously be talking about, you can never stay in one place. The Fear is creepy, and tests your ability to track and navigate the environment. Most of the time, he's invisible, or hiding in the trees. Along with this, his arena is filled with traps and pitfalls. The fight is the closest thing Metal Gear gets to Vietnam. The End is a battle of endurance and patience. The arena you fight in is huge and varied, and there is no way to brute force it, unless you cheat, obviously. It's not about doing more damage than he does to you, and not even really about fighting at all. It's all about keeping your camo up, not getting spotted, and using your equipment to your advantage. The only way to win is by staying patient, getting close enough without him spotting you, and blowing his dentures out. The Fury is all about positioning and ambush tactics. Get caught in the wrong hallway and your health bar gets drained faster than my will to live. For some reason, this is the boss that I always struggle with the most. He's a pain in my ass and God, I hate! The Sorrow is one of the most interesting fights in any game I've ever played. He acts as a mirror to the player, using the souls of all the people you've killed against you. All of your actions prior to his fight determine the nature of the fight itself. If you've played mercifully, choosing to sneak past or otherwise not kill anybody, his fight is a cakewalk. If you've chosen to kill every person you see, the fight is much, much harder, making Metal Gear Solid 3 one of the first games to ever have a morality system, something that definitely won't eventually become a bastardized and largely pointless idea. Finally, the boss is a perfect foil for Snake. She is Snake, and her boss fight reflects this perfectly. She uses camouflage, stealth, and CQC just like Snake does. It underpins the idea that Snake is really fighting himself here. Big Boss died the day he killed the boss. Snake even admits this in Metal Gear Solid 4. Killing her broke a part of him that he never managed to recover, and that underlines the real tragedy of the series. For all the evil that he goes on to commit, child soldiers, nuclear weapons, and a third world war, a line can be traced back to this exact moment. A man manipulated into killing the person he loved the most for a government just trying to cover its own ass. Metal Gear is a franchise with a near endless amount of potential for theory and speculation. But if there's one single thing I'm dead certain of, it's that Kojima loves David Bowie. He's a man after my own heart. How do I know this? Because every single character in this game is just a different Bowie era. The only character that I can point at and say isn't Bowie is, ironically enough, the openly bisexual one. I say openly bisexual because every other character in Metal Gear is a closeted bisexual, and the closet is made of glass. Something I always find interesting in the Metal Gear games are the very subtle homosexual undertones of the series. My god, these bitches gay as hell. Good for them. There's a reason why there's over an hour worth of characters just saying the most outlandishly homosexual things to one another throughout the series. I don't think Kojima did it just for the laughs either. I think it cuts deeper than that. Think about it. Who are the gayest characters in the franchise? Ocelot for sure. Big Boss, Kazuhira, Solid and Otacon definitely had something going on. There is no straight explanation for this scene. All of these hardened, trained killers, and they're all raging homosexuals. What did Kojima mean by this? Why are all of these warriors so goddamn lecherous for each other? It ties into the anti-war message of the franchise itself. War is gay. Metal Gear Solid 3 manages to visually capture the jungle perfectly, and while it definitely has shown its age over the last 20 years, I'd say that this is still a beautiful game in its own right. The foliage is thick and dense everywhere around you, and the game isn't afraid of making you intimately familiar with grass, a bold move considering how much Metal Gear fans despise the concept of touching it. Kojima is nothing if not a risk taker. Atmospherically, the game is terrifying. I don't know if it has something to do with my white suburbanite heritage, but the concept of being in a jungle for more than 2 seconds chills me to the core. The thick fog and torrential downpours strengthen the feeling of being at the mercy of the elements. I grew up in Kansas, okay? All I ever have to worry about is a tornado deleting my house and launching my dog into Nebraska. Monsoons are a foreign concept to me, and I'm afraid of things I don't understand. Just think of the sweat. Good lord. Snake has to smell like a Five-Finger Death Punch concert by the time this is over. The environments of Metal Gear Solid 3 are suffocatingly dense. There will be times where you can't see more than 10 feet in front of you, compared to Kansas, where at any time I can look out my window and see each of the 4 states surrounding me. It's incredibly restrictive, and in turn, frightening. Danger lurks around every corner, and if you don't pay attention, you're likely to fall prey to any number of predators, traps, or your own stupidity. This is a drastic departure from previous Metal Gear games, which take place in mostly concrete and steel military base-like environments. This, I would add, adds to the immersion when it comes to level transitions and environmental freedom. There are other areas in the game besides the jungle, including the mountaintops and the base of Groznygrad. These areas are great too, don't get me wrong, but they are somewhat less visually impressive than the jungle. Varying the environment was a smart choice, considering there's a whole camo system dedicated to different environments and all, but you can tell that the most effort went into the wilderness.
You're pretty good. Pretty good.
Metal Gear Solid 3 has one of the most iconic main themes of all time. If I went out into the deserts of Saudi Arabia and asked the nearest person to sing the words to Snake Eater, I guarantee that dude will recite it by heart with perfect pitch, right before stoning me to death for presenting him homosexual propaganda. Written and composed by Norihiko Hibino, the main theme of Snake Eater was designed to evoke the same feeling of a Bond movie, and somehow manages to become more Bond-like in the process than any actual Bond movie in existence. Norihiko somehow managed to write the lyrics, "Someday you'll feed on a tree frog," and make it sound amazing, so my hat's off to you. That's not to take away from the performance of Cynthia Harrell either. I don't think anyone could have sang this song better.
I give my life, not for honor, but for you.
Harrell is also well known for her performance of I Am the Wind for Castlevania Symphony of the Night, so you know this lady's got some pipes. The soundscape in general is also incredibly immersive, chirping birds, humming insects, rushing water. It all works to immerse you in the jungle. Just listening to this makes me want to check myself for leeches. Metal Gear Solid 3 forgoes some of the more action-packed beep-bop-boop soundtracks of the previous games for a more quiet, subtle one that only plays sporadically throughout the game. Combine all this with the more arcadey sounds like the alert and the pickup noise, and you've got yourself a recipe for a very iconic audio profile. There are subtle things in the audio design that makes this specific era of video games so iconic. Kojima is a master of knowing when to make something more realistic, and when it's okay to put in a sound effect straight out of an Atari. I honestly think that one of the most underrated parts of the franchise is Kojima's choice in sound design. Voice acting is notably corny. Snake, voiced by the legendary David Hayter, talks like a man who smokes 10 packs of cigarettes a day and chews gravel for fun.
It's not a cigarette, it's a cigar.
The boss, voiced by Lori Allen, aka Pearl from SpongeBob,
Think you can pull the trigger?
she says things very matter-of-factly, but speaks in a way that betrays this, letting out the occasional stutter or awkward pause.
Sokolov comes with me.
Like there's some part of her that can't help but hesitate when announcing her intentions. And then there's Volgin,
There is nothing America can do to stop us.
whose voice actor, Neil Ross, has been in about a million different things, but I only recognized him as the Codex narrator from the Mass Effect games.
The Asari were the first species to discover the Citadel.
You can tell this guy was having a blast with the role. He's so evil, and he loves every second of it. What a guy. Since I am forever cursed to be chasing the shadow of Christopher Randolph, this is the one singular Metal Gear game that he isn't in. Maybe one day I'll find him. I wouldn't call the voice acting in this game great, necessarily. Some of the dialogue comes across as pretty stilted or just plain weird, but I think it can be pretty safely chalked up to Kojima's directing, rather than the actual skill of the actors. Cheesy voice acting was in at the time, and you know what? Let's return to tradition. Bring this shit back, because I miss it so much.
It doesn't feel right to shoot an unarmed man. But I'll get over it.
I have to be careful here, because I might get shot if I say the wrong thing. This is a beloved game. I'm putting my neck on the line here saying anything bad about it, but that's just how dedicated I am to the field of journalism. One of the first things you'll notice when playing Metal Gear Solid 3 is the controls. Suffice to say, they ain't the best. To aim, you press the R1 button. To ready your weapon, you hold down the square button. And to fire, you release it. To lean, you use the triggers. And to stand on your tippy toes, you hold down both triggers. Aiming is done with the left stick, which means you cannot move while aiming unless you're in third person, in which case you aren't aiming very well. This is a control scheme that I can only surmise was the development of a deeply disturbed and sick individual locked in the basements of Konami. You do get used to it eventually, but I feel like we should all take a moment of silence to appreciate the fact that this basement-dwelling homunculus has apparently been put down, and better control layouts have been invented since then. Movement is also very dated. There's no such thing as crouch walking. You are either crawling prone or standing straight up. This is because the idea of bending your legs and then moving them wasn't actually invented until the late 1970s. I did also commonly find myself getting stuck on certain bits of terrain, namely walls. This isn't a big deal until an enemy is approaching your position and you need to relocate, only to find that your shins have been superglued to the tree behind you. Finally, and I hate to say this, but the camo system is, Perfectly fine! There's absolutely nothing wrong with having to pause the game every 5 seconds to keep your camo index at the highest number possible. Metal Gear Solid 5 didn't improve on this system in the slightest by having camo just be something that you pick before the mission and call in as a supply drop as needed. Other than that, there's only a few small nitpicks that I can really think of. The rest are pretty minor. The escort section with Eva sucks, but everyone knows that, and it lasts about a total of 2 minutes, so what can I say? The mountaintop area seems a bit rushed compared to the rest of the environments, and while I'm at it, what's up with the hovercraft guys? Oh, and you can eat rats. I don't know how this passed the ratings board, but I will be filing a complaint. This is highly offensive to me. I'm sorry, little one. I need the stamina. And that's it. That's every single thing I could think of that I somewhat dislike about this game. Maybe it says something about the quality of this game that the criticism section is so short. Or maybe it says something about my skills as a critic. I don't know. I never claimed to be good at this stuff. As hard as it may be to believe, there do exist human beings in this world with literally zero taste. Remember to look down upon these people, not with judgment, but with pity. They cannot help it, and they would do just about anything to change it, just like the British. Unfortunately, there is no cure. So join me as we take a moment to observe and study these rare individuals. This one blew me away. That's an odd way to start a 1-star review. I loved 1, and I loved 2. Both those games draw you in and are endlessly fun. I hated every possible thing about 3. I hated the villain, I hate the pain, the fear, etc. storyline. I thought it was overly simply and stupid, as opposed to the fat man in a bomb suit on roller skates from Metal Gear Solid 2, right? I think the 3D platform was ambitious, and because of that the levels are extremely straightforward. Metal Gear Solid 1 and 2 were both also 3D games, and way more linear than 3, so I don't get this. What an odd thing to say. I hated the gunslinger. The game literally forces you to watch minute-long cutscenes of him spinning his guns over and over and over. I get it. Buddy, if you've got problems with long cutscenes of people talking about guns, you're playing the wrong franchise. The villain is so over the top, I couldn't stand him. Again, I bring you Exhibit A from Metal Gear Solid 2. The game in itself is just extremely simply, since it was an ambitious project at the time. I would recommend skipping this one, but I am clearly in the minority here. I hated everything about this game. A lot of people love this game, so give it a chance, and see how you feel about it. Well, at least he admits his opinions are silly. It is the worst. I would not play this game anymore. You would not? What's stopping you? Is there a gun to your head right now? Do you need assistance? My brother likes it. I hate my brother. As a fellow brother hater, I sympathize, but I feel as though your hatred has clouded your judgment. A real alpha move would be to convince your brother that this game sucks, so that you can enjoy it instead. I hope you've enjoyed our little expedition into this strange and fascinating little game. The PS2 era is, and always will be, something near and dear to my heart. The way I feel about it is the same way you hear boomers talk about segregation. Things were better back then. Except I'm right, and the boomers all have holes in their brains from all the lead paint and asbestos. The PS2 era was the Wild West. There were no rules. It was a better time, and as much as I wish we could return with a V, this era has passed. It was lightning in a bottle, and nothing can recreate that magic. Until the day they invent a time machine, I'll just keep injecting weird-ass games directly into my veins, desperately trying to recreate that feeling of sitting in front of a shitty TV that took up half the space of my room and doubled as a walk-in closet. I see the Metal Gear franchise as a very early attempt to achieve the more cinematic gaming experience that we've come to know today, a true pioneer of its time, and one that somehow manages to actually be better than most of the games that we see releasing now. Sure, it's goofy as hell. There are a million retcons and plot contrivances, and it's all just ridiculously convoluted. But I think it does mean something that underneath all the dick jokes and silly robots, there's a story worth spending almost 30 minutes talking about in depth. And it's all thanks to one very mentally ill Japanese man's brain, interpreting the voices as guidance and refusing to take his medication. Hey critters, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, there are some buttons down there. Press them if you so desire. It will make me smile. Also, our little Discord community has reached a total of 9 members now. We enjoy talking about games, doing votes on the thumbnails for my next video, and shitting on Destiny players. And unlike most Discords, I can guarantee you there are 0 Discord kittens. We are Discord rats. Link will be in the description if you want to come join us. That's all for now, gang. One love. See ya.